we're going to have the opportunity to not just reconnect, but also to kind of add to what we're doing here in the way of show guests and reconnect to some people we maybe haven't seen in a while. And then, of course, it's the inaugural of me actually broadcasting from there. So in all of the years that I've been to CPAC, and I've missed a few years, family commitments always come first for us, but I've definitely never had the opportunity to broadcast from there. So I'm talking about broadcasting from Radio Row. I've done tons of interviews from CPAC, and I've met amazing people, and so I can't complain, but this will be my first year actually on Radio Row as a broadcaster. And this opportunity, I just have to say, praise God for it. I'm so excited. And we're going to be interviewing some pretty fantastic people. We're lining those up as we speak. The different people who are actually going to be there are reaching out and saying their availability for us to interview them. And I'm just so excited. It's going to be really fun. So who do we have on the show today? Well, we're going to speak to Chris Woodward from onenewsnow.com. He's going to come on and chat with us about news of the day. Tons of stuff going on, and they have a lot of great content there. If you want to get a preview, you can go to onenewsnow.com and check it out for yourself. Right now, I want to also just preview a little bit of Bernie Sanders. You know, YouTube's forever, and when people go to these conferences and they make these statements, usually it's on the right. Someone will go to a conference and say something really incendiary like there are two genders, or men and women are different, or people who are transgendered are mentally ill, something like that. And then years later, that audio will resurface and they'll say, oh, you said this horrible thing. You can't speak here. You can't be in Congress, something like that. Well, this is similar to that, only instead of it being something really incendiary that he said that's actually true, because the things that I just said that are supposed to be so earth-shattering, those are true statements. Bernie Sanders has a lot of old audio where he praises communism. He even would sit on panels with his wife, and they would talk about their visits to these third world, third bloc communist nations and how they have all this beautiful architecture. And so, first things first, I've been to back when Russia was the USSR, that the initials were how we actually referred to Russia, and it was CCCP in English. I was there as a teenager, and I saw the beautiful architecture, and I saw the public buildings and all of that. But I also saw a lot of poverty. Their main city, Moscow, it's gorgeous, it's modern, it's lovely. They mix the modern with the old architecture, and we're talking about carved ceilings, carved moldings, just gorgeous. And then they have a lot of brutalist architecture that is hideous, but it's so outsized in its scale that you just can't help but be impressed by the ugly enormity of it. And then they also have abject poverty. I mean, like, it puts our Appalachian rural areas to shame as far as, being examples of what poverty looks like. So the Sanders, as a couple, really went over there and got sold a bill of goods, and willingly they took the bill of goods and they bought it and they loved it. And they tried to come back to America to sell it. And so when people say Bernie Sanders is just, a communist with a socialist jacket on, or cloaked in socialism, and everyone says, no, that's not so. It is so. It is absolutely so. That is who that man is. And the sooner we get around to accepting it, the better. So we're going to be hearing from him and his wife. I love the way she looks and the way she talks in this. She sounds like she's talking about, my love of spode porcelain, just if we're talking about something so benign, so sweet, so innocent, something that doesn't hurt anyone, buying dishware doesn't hurt anybody. She talks about communism like women who collect dishes talk about their latest dishware pattern. It's amazing. It's amazing to listen to. So we'll hear that. And we'll talk about this Vermont House bill, which approves lawful abortion up to birth, and specifically states that babies shall not have independent rights under the law. And I have a number of poll pieces for you. Gallup says that liberals outnumber conservatives in only 6 states. That's down from 9. And that there's also some poll information on abortion, which I found kind of shocking because I didn't realize the numbers of abortion opponents were so large, that most Americans don't view abortion possibly in the way that they did 20 years ago. mainly because I think of technology and, of course, answered prayer. So first off, we always do this. I always love sharing this with you. And this is encouragement, our daily encouragement, which today is for the brokenhearted. I was reading through some scripture and thinking, about maybe some things that we haven't touched on in a while or haven't ever covered. And I thought about people who are brokenhearted because of loss or difficult circumstances or whatever the case might be. And I wanted to, share these scriptures in the hope of touching those people and encouraging them. And if you have someone in your life that's going through something like this, the loss of a family member, the loss of a friendship, the loss of a job, the loss of anything, these scriptures are very encouraging, and they can do a lot to help us move ahead and receive healing from God in these areas. So Psalm 73:26 says, "My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." Isaiah 41:10 says, "Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And that's Matthew 11:28 through 30. John 14:27 says, "Peace I leave with you, my peace I give to you, not as the world gives do I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let them be afraid." So in all things, we can trust our Creator to be there for us, to advocate on our behalf, and to work all things out for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. And remember, that part has a component of obedience. So that's getting in the scripture and trusting God for the outcome, being obedient in all things, as is his will for us in Christ Jesus. So I hope that encourages you today. So first I want to hear this there's this a little bit, teensy bit of audio that I want you to hear before we get into this next subject. That's number 3.
Jerry, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Does that sound familiar? That's the Seinfeld show from way back in the day. And he says, "Jerry, it's not a lie if you believe it." And that's the situation we find ourselves in right now. We have an entire country of people, some on one side, some on the other, some happily oblivious and not on any side. And out of all of the people who I'm discussing here, all of the Americans, everyone has a belief system that they're really buying into, and they're sure this is right. And so when he says, "Remember, Jerry, it's not a lie if you believe it," that is so true. Now, we don't want to be deceived into thinking that things that are lies are true. But how often are we actually deceived into that very situation? And so I know we're not doing a whole lot of discussion about AOC, but I do think one of the things that has been really sold to a lot, especially millennials and young people, is that no matter how hard you work, you're never going to make it. If you're black or you're brown or you're a woman, if you've got some kind of mental illness, or if you're working, against yourself by engaging in sexual sin, which honestly, that is a sin against the temple of Holy Spirit, and you're not going to be as prosperous as you could be if you're engaging in that. But the idea that you could be in America today in 2019 and work super hard, maybe get an education, maybe go to training school, maybe work your way up from the bottom of something, start your own business, and you can't make it. This is something that's being sold to us. And when I say us, it's all of us, because we're all impacted. For every person that's out there who thinks, you know what, I got to get up today and I got to kill this thing. I got to do my best, because if I do, I'm going to be further ahead at the end of today than I was at the beginning. And at some point, I'm going to hit my stride and I'm going to be successful. For every person like that, there's another person who gets up in the morning, looks in the mirror and says, I'm a victim. The white patriarchy is oppressing me, and I got to find somebody to pay for all the things that I'm going through. They don't look at their choices. They don't look at their decisions. They don't look at their culture. And when I say culture, we have American culture, but underneath that umbrella, we have differing forms of that. You have what they call white Anglo-Saxon Protestant culture, which is church attending, two-family, two-parent households, living in the suburbs, working, maybe even the wife staying home, and a family unit that is very traditional. which has yielded a lot of success. Now, you can go back into the history and say, well, they were able to do this and they were able to do that and there was segregation. Yes, but in the model, that is the one that gets the most success. Instead of looking at that and saying, I want to emulate that, we have a lot of people who are saying, yeah, the reason why two-parent households are successful is because they've got some kind of marriage advantage, which anyone can have. All you have to do is find someone that you like and marry them. Or do it the biblical way, and a man finds a wife, you get married, and then you start having kids. But there's something more to it than that. There's this, I read an article on BuzzFeed, and I know BuzzFeed is trash, but bear with me here. I read an article at BuzzFeed over the weekend about student loan debt. And in the article, they interview people and talk to them. These are young college professionals, and some of them do actually have degrees in, very respectable fields, but they complain about how even when they had very low student loan debt in undergrad, they went on to graduate school and maybe they went and it cost $50,000. And so now they have these unmanageable loan payments. And they talk about the interest being loaded up front and how even with forbearance and even with, deferred payment plans, they can't seem to stay on top of it. And they're just not making the money they thought they would make. And so the article is very detailed. And I thought it was so interesting. And since our kids are in that high school to college range, we're going to actually have a big discussion about it over dinner tonight. But it's one of those things where I kind of wonder, the more I dig into this, and it'll be interesting to see after our discussion tonight, if when we unpack it, is it truly that these people are literally doing everything the way they were told to do it and they're still failing because the system is wrong? Or is it because we've bought into a lie, like he says, it's not a lie if you believe it, that you have to borrow money to go to college, and that in doing so, you have to be provided a way for that to work out, as opposed to the truth, which is a lot of people are going to colleges that cost $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year, and they're going for majors that aren't going to yield the kind of ROI that's going to enable them to pay those student loan debts. $60,000, $70,000 a year means you're well over $250,000 when you're done. Most people are taking longer than 4 years to complete a college degree. If you're borrowing all of that money, how can you expect to be successful unless you come out and make $150,000 a year and everything else is perfect? Never a mistake. You never maybe get fired, get laid off. You never have any break in employment, and you don't borrow for anything else. You rent, live with roommates, drive a used car. Does that sound like something you're going to do if you're making $150,000 a year and you have all that student loan debt? You're already used to living high off the hog. So I'm kind of previewing this because I want to touch back on it a little bit over time as a continuing conversation as to what we really believe. It's not a lie if you believe it. Do we believe that all you have to do is graduate from high school and go to college and you can borrow any amount of money that you want, and when you're done, you're going to have the opportunity to earn money and make those student loan payments, as opposed to the more frugal American outlook that we used to have, which was you don't borrow more than you can afford to pay, and if you can get away with not borrowing anything, you do that. Which is the lie that we're choosing to believe, and which is the truth? We'll discuss it. I also have this story about this kid who made $35,000 in 4 days shoveling snow. So we'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. You know, on our Spiritual Heritage Tour of Washington, D.C., we go to the Supreme Court. That's one of the places we go on day one, and we visit the inside chambers. We go to where the justices sit, and it's an amazing place to visit, the Supreme Court of the United States. We don't just look at the outside, we go to the inside and see where the justices sit and where oral arguments are heard. So that's just one of the places we visit on one of the days. We're in Washington, D.C., and we also go to Mount Vernon, the home of George and Martha Washington. So we're going in September. June's full. September will be filling up soon. If you want more information on this Spiritual Heritage Tour, go to spiritualheritagetours.com. That's spiritualheritagetours.com.
Hi, I'm Crawford Ritz with a legacy moment. I remember many years ago when our grandson Quentin celebrated his second birthday, our son and his wife took him to one of those fun places where they serve pizza and they have games for the kids. Brian shared with me that for some reason, when the clown approached Quentin, he got scared. Brian said for the rest of the evening, little Quentin kind of clung to him, stayed glued to his daddy. I guess my grandson knew that his father would protect him and take care of him. There are times when we are frightened, too. We get scared because it's bigger than what we thought it was going to be, or it was more difficult than we thought it was going to be, or there's a greater opposition than we had anticipated. But when God himself gives us an assignment, we can be assured of his presence. In Joshua chapter 1, verses 5 and 9, God underscores his perspective with Joshua. Listen to what he says in verse 5. Just as I've been with Moses, I will be with you. I will not fail you or forsake you. The end of verse 9 says, do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. That's incredible to me. Think about it. When God gives us an assignment, the pressure is not on us. The pressure is on him. God always gives himself to us when he gives us an assignment to do for him. God didn't say to Joshua, okay, go on over there. I hope you make it. No, he said, I am with you wherever you go. Well, here's what I want you to remember today. You're not in this thing by yourself. God is with you each step of the way. Cling to him. He will protect you and take care of you.
You've been listening to Legacy Moment with Crawford Loritz, pastor of Fellowship Bible Church in Roswell, Georgia. To view an online transcript of today's thoughts by Crawford, go to livingalegacy.org. That's livingalegacy.org.
You can watch a live stream of the show on Facebook or YouTube at Stacy on the Right. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Welcome back to the program. It's my pleasure to point you over to all of our fun sites. UrbanFamilyTalk.com is where you can find out about the conference. It's a marriage and family conference, marriage, family, and life conference that we're going to have at the end of June. And you can find out everything you need to know about this ministry-wide. It's going to be it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful conference. An extension of what we did last year, an expansion on that. You can go to urbanfamilytalk.com to find out more about it. You can go to afr.net to read all the blog posts over at the stand. A number of our hosts right there, and it's fantastic content. And then you can go to stacyontheright.com and hit the subscribe button, and we'd be so happy to have you there as well. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome Chris Woodward. He is from onenewsnow.com, and we always have a great time chatting about news of the day, and we're looking for updates and kind of to get current here. Chris, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
All right, so let's talk about it. What's hot on the button over at onenewsnow.com?
Well, in addition to Coca-Cola coming out with its first new flavor in more than a day, I'm just kidding. There is a new flavor of Coke. It's orange vanilla. Apparently, it beat out raspberry, lemon, and ginger, 3 different flavors. But anyway, but as a former friend, a longtime friend of mine would say, I digress. Yeah, the big thing we're watching right now, a lot of pro-life news, one of them being a vote later tonight. The U.S. Senate is expected to vote on a bill called the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. This is a measure introduced in January by Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska, and it would protect the lives of infants who survive abortion. And, of course, it comes after a number of states have tried to step up efforts to allow abortion up until birth. New York was successful in that effort. Virginia talked about it. That failed, but it'll come back. And now we even have the Vermont House passing sweeping no-limits abortion legislation. So on the federal level, Senator Ben Sasse and a number of other senators are trying to protect the lives of infants who survive abortion. And American Family Association, by the way, the ministry that oversees all of us here at AFA and AFR and Urban, is supporting the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act.
So that kind of piggybacks onto, I found this piece, which the story is about a number of different things. The Vermont House approving, which you just mentioned. But at the end of it, and it's over at lifenews.com, they actually have some poll information, and I just wanted to get your feedback on this. So there's an interesting statistical anomaly here, which I don't think gets reported on mainstream media outlets, which is all of these legislative acts that seek to make abortion lawful up until and even after the birth of the baby are really out of touch with most Americans' views on abortion. And I'm not talking about East Coast, center of the country variances. I'm talking about across the board.
Right.
It says a national poll by Marist University, which is not a conservative organization, says 3 in 4 Americans, 75%, say abortion should be limited to, at most, the first 3 months of pregnancy, which includes most Republicans at 92%, independents at 78%, and a majority of Democrats, 60%. And 6 in 10 of those people who believe this identify as pro-choice. So they're pro-choice, quote unquote, but they think after the 3rd month, if you haven't made the choice, then you have a baby coming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really, we were talking about this earlier today on AFR Talks, Today's Issues program. Tim Wildman, president of AFA, had mentioned how he recalled back into the 1990s when then President Bill Clinton talked about a need to make abortion, safe and rare, something of that sort. And here we are now. I mean, there are people that, if given the opportunity, they would allow for abortion after the baby has been born and maybe hit 1 or 2 years old. We have completely just, I don't even know the word for the direction that we've moved in. It's horrible.
Well, it's depravity, and it's the state of the human heart, which without Jesus Christ, we're depraved and wicked. But I think what's interesting is we're talking about a very vocal minority of depraved individuals who are pushing the pendulum in this direction. A May 2018 Gallup poll found that 53% of Americans oppose all or most abortions. So 53%. So if you break these numbers down, if you take that 53%, well, that leaves, it's a sizable number of Americans who are in favor of abortion. But then if you break it down further and you talk about, well, let's just say, instead of saying all abortions, let's just say that first trimester, then people solidify around that. They're willing to accept that, but they're not willing to accept the rest. But we're seeing the passage of the rest of it, what comes after that first trimester. I think it's because we're falling down on the job and doing, the discipling that we're supposed to do, and really talking to people one-on-one about what abortion is and why we oppose it, and being vocal about it, because I think Americans are afraid to oppose it because of how vitriolic the opposition can be.
Well, I think, I talked about the need for, well, let me back up. A few weeks ago, I interviewed Sam Rohr of American Pastors Network, and Sam had mentioned how we need to, churches across the country, talk more about the life issue. It needs to be preached more from the pulpit. People need to be talking about it in congregations, Sunday schools, what have you, because a lot of times it doesn't get mentioned. If it does, it might be on a pro-life day and Sunday once a year, in January once a year, but then it doesn't get, touched again. And I think some of the reasons for that is some pastors are afraid they're going to maybe be viewed as getting into politics and it would jeopardize their tax exemption status or whatnot. Other times I think pastors are afraid that, some of their congregants might think, well, you're preaching too hard or you're touching on my sin. But that's what a pastor is supposed to do. And also, too, I wouldn't bank too much on the fact that, well, we've got a Republican-led Senate, this bill's going to sail through, because I talked about it with Carol Tobias of the National Right to Life Committee, and she said it was her impression that there might be a couple of Republicans that would actually vote no on the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act.
Okay, yeah. So I heard that too this morning, that there are a couple of Republicans who are going to swing to the other side, and I think that's really instructive. So those Republicans probably come from states that, are much more liberal in their orientation, and so they feel like they have to do that to stay in office. But this should be a moral issue that we can cross lines on. Like the young woman, she's a elected Democrat and she's pro-life, and she spoke at the March for Life this year. And she's doing that regardless of her party affiliation. And I believe she's doing that because she's a Christian and she believes that she's going to be held accountable for this. So while she may be, liberal in other areas, she feels like the life issue is where the rubber meets the road for her, and she doesn't want to be faced with that. I agree with you about the pastors, but I also think it's something much more fundamental, which is we have this desire to be liked and not to be seen as radical or fundamental or extremist Christians when the gospel is extreme. The idea that we could just say, you know what, this is just it's too dicey of an issue for me, that pastors could say that parishioners could say that. That's why we have so much of this just running loose across the country, because we're not saying, you know what, okay, this is extreme, but the gospel is extreme, and I want to be on the right side of that. And so we have to make a choice to advocate on behalf of the unborn. Otherwise, we're advocating against them, because there's really only two sides you can be on.
Right. And, we talked about this several weeks ago when we were talking about Nancy Pelosi quoting a Bible verse that's not actually a Bible verse, and how that must be from the NPV. Don't just take it from what, don't just get your Bible from our shows here on AFR or Urban or whatnot. Actually get into the Word yourself and see what it is that we're talking about. Don't let us be your only church. Get into the Word and figure out things and where exactly God does stand on life. God does not like hands that shed innocent blood. He actually hates it, the Bible tells us. So that's why we here at AFR or Urban or whatnot tend to be as pro-life as we are, because that's what God tells us in His Word, which we call the Holy Bible.
Yeah, and I think one of the examples that we can take is this is shared widely across social media by Will Addison, Miki Addison, Abraham Hamilton III. Lots of people here on the network shared this story about how, I think it's the Methodists, and they have their African counterparts at this conference, and the African counterparts don't want to sign on to a revision to their kind of doctrinal statements that would permit homosexual marriage and homosexuals in leadership. And, it basically would recognize the kind of falling away that we're experiencing in the United States and kind of open the door to it across the world. And the African delegation, a pastor from there said, we're used to being different than our American counterparts. We live on less. We don't have as much wealth or excess. And even if your decision to do this means that we can't have your partnership monetarily, others around the globe will fill that gap, and we trust God to take care of us, but we will not sell our support for something that's ungodly for your partnership and donations. And it's an eloquent speech that he gave. I didn't feel like reading it there was any anger there. It was just a simple statement that he would not deviate from God's word on what he believed, and we all need to adopt that attitude on these are core issues. They're biblical issues where the Bible is clear that we are not to destroy the unborn. We have to get stronger on this.
Right. And it's not just Methodist. I mean, we've seen cultural issues pop up in other denominations to the point that politics has really been the message preached from the pulpits. And you've had some, membership. You've had churches drop or have membership issues where people are leaving and finding other places to worship. What's interesting with the Methodist situation is, how did those churches in Africa get planted? They were from Methodists here in the U.S. that obviously went over there and preached the gospel, trained up pastors, and started operations there. And now it's the Africans that are holding the line on where exactly God's word stands on these issues, that are trying to keep the mother denomination, if you will, in line as well. But I don't think that's going to happen, given the way a number of denominations, not just the UMC, has gone.
But I think it's really interesting that so what you just said, that's totally the case. The Methodists went over there and planted churches, and now over here in the United States, we've been so just led astray by our culture that now it's the baby churches, that's what you would call them because they're so young compared to the Methodist Church in the United States. The baby churches are like speaking to the parents and saying, no, this is sin. You can't do this.
Exactly.
And they're willing to stand alone. They're willing to say, we may be baby churches, but we'll kick off our training wheels and we'll become, full-blown adult churches. And we won't, if you won't support us and you want to go away from the gospel, you'll go on your own because we'll stay here with God's word. It's a great example for us. And I think, it's really telling that it's the reversal. And there's often a lot of people will say to me, and I don't get into a whole lot of end time stuff because I feel like there's so much work for us to do. We shouldn't spend time bickering about who believes, what exactly Revelation says. But there is no reference to something that is exactly the United States, right? And obviously that's, the Bible was written before we existed here as a country.
Right.
But it just seems like we're on a very, very bad path as a church, as the Christian church in America, for surviving until, what Revelation says begins to unfold. Where will we be if we keep on this path, legalizing late-term abortion and even abortion after birth, which is infanticide, et cetera, et cetera?
And Janet Mefford, she aired some clips of herself at a conference that she recently attended, and Janet had made the point that the reason churches are having problems they're having today on a number of issues is because people in the church did not confront them and did not be the salt and life we're all called to be, salt and light. We're all called to be in the public square. And that's why we're seeing these issues come in from the culture into our churches. And now churches are trying to bend in ways they're not supposed to try to make everybody in the congregation happy. That's not what the church is supposed to do.
No, it isn't. And it's supposed to be that when you're out of line with what God has, in his word for us, that members of the body, confront and gently lead you back to where you're supposed to be. It's not supposed to be that every sin, everybody has their own sin. They put a banner on or a sticker, I believe in same-sex marriage. I believe in this and that. And then the church tries to conform to every sticker in the seats. Mm-hmm. That's not the way it's supposed to work. And, Janet Maverick is really wise when she talks about these cultural issues. We have an enormous, it's like a brain trust of people who are out there speaking and writing the truth. And it's up to individual Christians to say, I've got sin in my life. I need to figure out where I need to repent. I need to repent and just give up on going my own way so I can please God and glorify him, because eternity is a really long time to be wearing, your sticker eternally separated from God.
Yeah. I don't know what the exact thing, the thing we need to be talking about more in church. Certainly we do need to be talking about the life issue, but I think just sin in general, because it's not really until you understand what sin is and that you are a sinner that you can understand grace as much as a human mind can try to understand it. We need to be preaching more on the sin, because then you understand the need for salvation and what grace is. We do too much of, I don't want to say prosperity gospel, but a lot of church messages tend to be more on the love your neighbor and, be kind to one another and don't use bad words and all the things that we should understand and adhere to. But it's got to be brought back to sin and gospel and the good news of Jesus Christ and why exactly he came. Otherwise, we're just trying to be the best people we can be in a lost and dying world. And as a result of trying to do things like that, we are seeing the issues we're seeing not just in the UMC, but nationwide in a number of churches or just in society in general.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I'm one of those BSFers, Bible Study Fellowship, and we're studying the life of David, and we're at the difficult part, because in the beginning, David is this idealist.
Oh, sure.
He's just, it's so wonderful to read about him.
Is there not a cause?
Yeah. And then he goes into this part of his life where he makes an enormous mistake, and the ramifications from it it's a great learning time about sin, but it's so hard to read because you're so high up when you get to the place where he falls, and God is faithful. But the lesson is that he doesn't tolerate any sin, and we're all sinners. We're all of us, because we sometimes say, "Oh, I haven't killed anybody," but we're all sinners, and we need the gospel. Thank you,
Amen.
Chris Woodward. Thanks for joining today. I'll talk to you again soon. OneNewsNow.com for more. We'll be back with more here. Stacy on the right. Your calls. Keep it here.
Can solid teamwork building principles apply to all of life? Here's Tony Dungy, author of The Soul of a Team, with today's uncommon moment.
In my book, The Soul of a Team, SOUL is an acronym, and the S stands for selflessness, which is defined as putting individual needs aside for the good of the team. In 2007, just before my final season as a head coach, the Colts drafted Anthony Gonzalez, a wide receiver from Ohio State. Because he wouldn't complete his studies until June, Anthony was unable to make off-season practices and minicamp. Not wanting his new teammate to miss out, Peyton Manning drove 3 hours to Columbus, Ohio twice a week so he could spend an hour going over the playbook with Anthony and another hour and a half throwing to him. He sacrificed his own time because that's what the Colts needed to be successful.
Tony Dungy, best-selling author of The Soul of a Team, from Tyndale House. More at CoachDungy.com.
Stephen Black.
Because my molester spoke to me while being molested that I had somehow caused this, I had a deep sense of darkness and shame. The thing that I see in others as ministering to them this deep sense of shame, and that's what brings about healing once that is discovered that their innocence was taken from them.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through the 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
Hi, friends. There's a new show in town on Urban Family Talk, nightly, 7 p.m. Central. Join me, C.L. Bryant, as we build the bridge to conversation throughout our great nation, the greatest nation on the face of the planet, the greatest success story the world has ever known. Nightly, the C.L. Bryant Show over Urban Family Talk, 7 p.m.
Donald Trump's America.
President Trump tweeted Sunday that the only collusion in 2016 was by Democrats. This as the Mueller investigation is rumored to be near a close. When the report is done, House Intel Committee Chair Adam Schiff says he wants it to be fully released, citing on ABC's This Week
the intense public need to know here, which I think overrides any other consideration.
The Justice Department argues if no charges are filed, it can decide how much of the report is released. Also, the president jets off to Vietnam for another summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. On Fox News Sunday, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says denuclearization remains the goal.
We're determined to achieve that. It's important for the world's security.
On Fox's Sunday Morning Futures, GOP Senator Lindsey Graham says a treaty with North Korea would be a big win.
They give up their nukes. We help them develop their economy, and all ends well.
The Trump-Kim meeting begins Wednesday. Gernal Scott, Fox News.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I think it's also fair to point out that when we were in Moscow, for example, I think most of the people here also were extremely impressed by their public transportation system. The stations themselves were absolutely beautiful. Including many works of art, chandeliers that were beautiful. It was a very, very effective system. Also, I was impressed by the youth programs that they have, their palaces of culture for the young people, a whole variety of of programs for young people, and cultural programs which go far beyond what we do in this country. We went to a theater in Yaroslavl, which was absolutely beautiful, had 3 separate stages, where cultural programs are put on by professional actors and actresses, including a puppeteer area. And the cost, the highest price of a ticket that you can get was the equivalent of $1.50.
Okay, welcome back to Stacy on the Right. If you want to call in and join us and talk about old crazy Bernie Sanders and his communist loving self, come on and call in 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. You can join us. Okay, so listen, guys. So I've seen some of these structures he's talking about. One of the parts of Moscow that we toured was their train station. And you go underground, and it's not like the subways of New York where it's a rectangular enclosed space and it's big enough for the train to go through, but there's nothing really glorious about it. It's like you go underground, and it's a much steeper, like the staircase is you go further down. Once you get down there, you look around, and there are these amazing mosaics in the wall, and they go all the way up, and the ceiling is barreled. So you have a barrel ceiling, you have mosaics going all up and down it, and if it's not mosaic tile, then it's beautiful, intricate paintings. You might not like the subject matter of the paintings. A lot of the paintings that are on the walls are paintings depicting workers enjoying themselves as they work on the communist, kind of plantation or what have you. But it's some of the most gorgeous, it's like going through a museum, but it's the train, it's the underground train. And so, there's this juxtaposition, there's this abject command and control structure. There are the gulags where people died for having their own opinions. There isn't a free press. We're talking about during communism. But then there's all this beauty in the places where people, would use for public transportation. And Bernie Sanders mentions that it's only $1.50. Well, you can't charge a ton for a train that is built by the workers for free. You can't charge a ton for them to use it if they don't have money. So the fact that it only costs $1.50 is a reflection, or the $1.50 to get to ride it. It's a reflection of the fact that the people don't have any money. So everyone has to ride it. So it's almost mandatory transportation because, you know, not very many except the proletariat and those who are in power have their own private vehicles. So you have to ride the train. So they don't have to charge much for it. I mean, it's kind of, you know, it's supported whether or not you're paying for it. If you just decide you're going to walk to your job and you're not going to ride the train, and so everyone else is riding it, so it doesn't matter. So there's this it's like a willful ignorance that the Sanders couple engages in when they're touting these things about communism. And remember, again, Bernie Sanders in this audio clip is not talking about a socialist paradise. He's talking about the communist nation state, a place where simply writing on a piece of paper that you disagree with whoever is in charge gets you kidnapped in the middle of the night, maybe your house, shut down with a little sign put on it, you know, that people who don't believe lived here. Maybe your family disappears too. Maybe all of your extended family disappears. Or maybe you and your immediate family disappear, you, your wife and kids, and your extended family is told you may be missing your family member because they had the wrong views, to send a message to the rest of the community that you don't just write down anything you want. Maybe you're an artist and you depict something in your art that is not acceptable. You depict capitalism. You're gone in the middle of the night. They send you to a work camp and they work you so hard that your body literally fails after a year or two of it and you die. Or they send you to Siberia and torture you to within an inch of your life and then work you until you die. That's what he's glorifying here. He's doing it under the guise of having this eye for beauty. Who doesn't? Who among us doesn't like to go onto Instagram? I can tell you I do. If you see the people I follow on Instagram, I'm not following political types. I mean, I follow a couple, but the majority of the people that I'm following are showing decor, or they're showing some amazing landscape companies or production companies that show funny videos that they actually write and do all of it themselves. So they're in marketing. It's the kind of stuff that stimulates the creative side because they get enough of the political side. I search that stuff out. I have the websites I go to. I'm constantly immersed in that. But when it's pictures, when you want to see something beautiful, all of us are stimulated by that. All of us enjoy visual representations of beauty. We're made for that. God created us for that. So it's like you're saying, I could go out and buy, 2 acres of land and build a huge structure on it, and then have mosaic artists and painters and sculptors come in and just lay the place out like a palace. And so it's beautiful on the inside, and the outside is an architectural marvel, and magazines are coming and photographing it. And then when they say, wow, this is lovely, what do you do here? I say, oh, we torture people here. And then Bernie Sanders would come and say, but how much does it cost to get in? I say, oh, it's $1.50. You can get in and watch me torture people for $1.50. And some people die, but look at the beauty of this building. And he'd say, yes, look at the beauty of this building. The building is so beautiful. Who cares what you're doing inside? What I want to know is, for $1.50, I can come in and I can spend all the time I want here. Yeah, you only have to pay $1.50 once. We actually tag you like a dog. We put something under your skin so you can get in and out as much as you want. $1.50 once, and you can get in and out all you want. And you can enjoy the beautiful mosaics. And if you hear the screams of the people we're torturing, don't worry about that. Just keep looking at how pretty the ceiling is. We had it painted in al fresco. It took 800 hours for it to be finished, and it took a team of artisans who work for free. It took them 7 months to put it together. And so the whole building, it took us 5 years to build, and it even has an extensive basement system with a barrel ceiling with mosaics down there as well. And, we have a pit back there too where we throw the bodies. But anyway, it's a lovely place, and he would just be all for it because it's pretty. Pretty outweighs the fact that people are being tortured and killed there. Does that sound like someone who should be in charge of anything? He should not be an elected official, let alone mounting yet another run for the presidency. And all that money he raised from nincompoops and idiots and people whose brain synapses do not fire correctly, $6 million in like 30 hours, they're the kind of people who they would also pay $1.50 to get in and look at the pretty things on the wall while people are being tortured and killed. This is just craziness. All right, let's go to the phones. Hey, let's go to Jacob in Alabama. Hey, Jacob, thanks for calling the show today.
How you doing, sister?
Doing pretty good.
All right. Okay. Now, I grew up not that far from New York City, and unless you grew up in New York City, you don't understand the mentality of Bernie Sanders or Ocasio. You don't understand that mentality because, see, the city is beautiful. It's got Guggenheim Museum and all this different things, but the city itself depends on where you grew up at. Squeezes the life out of you, and it makes you very small-minded and very narrow in how you see things. And the sad thing about it, but one thing is, even people like that, they have a certain aura about them, a strength about them, but they're lost. And until, if you don't, as a missionary, I've been all over the United States, so, and then growing up here in the city, I know the mentality, and then you got Ocasio-Cortez. She was a bartender, and I'm like, and you can see her mentality. Plus, she grew up, like that, this small, narrow mind, and she doesn't even understand the whole world's not like that. The whole world's not New York City, and that's both of them have that mindset. And unless you stepped outside that realm and seen and experienced the whole world, really, not going from one place to another, like New York City, they really don't understand. And the saddest thing is, people, we are sheep. We will follow, if it sounds good. And you just have to pray for them for the eyes of their understanding to be enlightened because they are truly deceived and lost.
I agree. Jacob, thank you for calling the show. And so one of the things that, that has to temper our conversation as Christians is to say, just like he said, these are people in need of a Savior. When God sends the Holy Spirit and you become a Christian, your eyes are open and you're able to see how idiotic it sounds to praise the architecture of a communist country. There's no doubt that Moscow is a beautiful city and that it holds beautiful artifacts that tourists can purchase. I have some right here in the house that have moved everywhere I've ever moved in my adult life. These little pieces of trinkets that I got from Moscow in my freshman year of high school, I have them with me. And they're mementos from that time. I have a whole stack of postcards, like 6 inches thick, of these beautiful places that he's talking about. But at no point in our visit did I ever want to live in Moscow. At no point in our visit did I ever think to myself, this is what we should have in our country. I remember us marveling at how nice the people were there. Oh my goodness, the Russians were so nice. And when they found out we were American students, they were like, oh, tell us about so tell us about where you live. And they were surprised to find that we were coming there from Germany because that's where I grew up and we were living in Germany at the time. And they're like, well, you live in Germany. Where in Germany do you live? So we tell them where we lived and what the name of our school was and all that. And they're like, wow, so you speak such perfect English. And we're like, well, we're American kids. Our parents are in the military. And they're like, the military. And so it was really just a rich experience. But these are people who had no choice. It's not like they said, let's all be communists. They were born into communism. And later they came out of it, but they still haven't recovered. Not in the way that we have been able to recover from the rough times we've had in the past. They have not recovered. And it's just so sad that people are buying this bill of goods. Keith in Michigan. Hey, Keith, thanks for calling the show today.
Hey, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
Hey, Stacy, you and I come pretty much from the same generation, same time frame. I also served in the military and the Army, and it's something that I've seen in Germany, Berlin. One thing that everybody keeps on forgetting about is there is a distinct separation of what the culture was like, not necessarily the culture, but the society and how socialism impacted East Germany versus West Germany. Mm-hmm. It was such a dichotomy different, and you've probably seen it yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, living in Germany yourself. And one thing I wanted to say about Bernie Sanders, it's great, $1.50 to go get a ticket, but it's pretty expensive if you're only making 25 cents a day.
It is. And the other thing, Keith, that we can both agree on is Bernie Sanders, with all of his communist, socialist, Marxist dreams, if he was told you only get to choose one, let's go back 30 years, right? 30 years ago, you asked Bernie Sanders, you can live on this side of the Berlin Wall or you can live on that side. So east side or west side, which do you pick? he would pick the West Side all day long. And if you said, but this is where they're practicing socialism, you have to be on the socialist side, he'd say, nope, I'm an American citizen. I'm staying over here on the West Side. I'm going to be a tourist here, and I'm going to go back to America. I mean, do you think he would ever choose to live in a fully developed socialist, utopia, as it were, like East Germany?
Not in your life.
Of course he wouldn't. Thanks for the call, Keith. That's a great point. I remember we took a field trip, and you could take different kinds of field trips. And one of the ones that they had was you're on a charter bus and you travel to Berlin and you tour all around Berlin. And then when you get to the wall, you get to actually ride the charter bus from the West Berlin side to the East Berlin side. And so that's the tour that we took as a school. It was a Berlin trip. And this, I mean, obviously I'm dating myself, but this is I took this tour. I'm not sure if I was in middle school or high school. We rode the bus across, and it was like going from a colored world, a world full of color, a full color Technicolor world, into a black and white world. All the buildings were covered with soot. They were dirty, and there was almost no color anywhere. And everything was, obviously in German, but there were also some words in Russian, to label the buildings. But it was so stark. We came back, we weren't allowed to get off the bus. And this is back when the wall was still up. So we had to have permission to go across. It was a tour we took. And I remember we started asking, the kids just erupted. As soon as we got across the border and we saw, everyone said, where are the children? Where's all the color? Why is everything so gray and dirty? And our teacher stood at the front of the bus with a microphone and said, this is socialism. This is what happens when the government controls the means of production and the people, and even tells them whether they can come or go out of their own country. This is what it looks like. I'll never forget it. And we've got Americans with their Starbucks and their lattes and their $1,000 phones and their $900 worth of clothes on and their custom shoes and their own slogans printed on their T-shirts, advocating for Bernie Sanders to be in charge of this country. Every one of them needs a round-trip ticket to the parts of Berlin that have still not been remodeled 20 years after the wall came down. Germany, 10, 15 years ago, Germany was spending 20 billion euros a month to update East Germany after the wall fell. I know this because in 2006, my husband and I traveled to Germany with our kids and visited my high school and the place where I grew up and stayed in Stuttgart. And a lady at the train station told us our taxes are so high because we're spending 20 billion euro a month to update the old land, East Germany. All right, we'll be back with more after this. If you're leaving us, God bless from the heartland. StacyOnTheRight.com.
Family Talk.
You only want to donate to biblically sound organizations. So as a federal or state employee, why not choose the American Family Association Combined Federal Campaign Designation 12037? Of the organizations on the CFC list, AFA is one of the few standing for you and your family. By choosing 12037, you help make it possible for us to continue.
Truth, wisdom, empowerment. Urban Family Talk, a ministry of the American Family Association.
For American Family News, I'm Chris Woodward. Vice President Mike Pence says the U.S. is sending another $56 million to neighbors of Venezuela to help them cope with migrants fleeing that nation's deepening crisis. Pence says the U.S. has already provided more than $139 million in aid to help Venezuela. Political unrest in Haiti is making things more difficult for missionaries there. Bill Bumpus reports.
Dr. David Vanderpool is a trauma surgeon and founder of Live Beyond Medical Missions. He's been working in Haiti since the 2010 earthquake and living in the country full-time for the past 7 years. He says since about last summer, the demonstrations have appeared to be better funded, more organized, with more weapons involved, and that's led to more violence.
The violence is affecting us definitely indirectly.
Vanderpool tells AFN they routinely host volunteer mission teams and often has had to place those trips on hold when violence erupts in Haiti's capital. The violence has also made it hard to get supplies into their hospital. He believes the violence is politically motivated.
I really think that this is probably more trying to get a socialist government in place.
He asks for prayer for the situation.
There's no food in the marketplace. There's no gasoline. The people who are penalized here are the poor. And as Christians, we're called to minister to those poor.
While some are giving up on Haiti because of the violence, Vanderpool says,
this is the time to do just the opposite. It's the time to be more focused on Haiti when they're experiencing so much difficulty.
I'm Bill Bumpus.
The U.S. Supreme Court says federal courts can't count the vote of a judge who has died in a decision issued after the judge's death. The High Court said in an unsigned opinion Monday that federal judges are appointed for life, not for eternity. The case the court was ruling on involved Judge Stephen Reinhart, a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. He died on March 29, 2018, but was listed as the author of a decision issued 11 days after he died. Negotiations in Oakland over the latest teacher strike apparently aren't going so well. Here's Fox's Jessica Rosenthal.
It is day 3 of the Oakland teacher strike.
My message to our OEA members is you are strong, we are winning, hold the line.
The teachers are sticking to their demands, 12% pay raise, retroactive to 2017. But many of the teachers say they want more than that. They want the district to reprioritize how it spends money on students. Evelyn Ramirez is a first-grade teacher who says the district wants to teach the teachers how to administer insulin after one student was diagnosed with diabetes.
Where are the nurses OUSD is providing for a safe learning environment?
The district has offered a 7% raise for teachers over 4 years with a one-time bonus.
A House committee in the New Hampshire legislature has voted against repealing a 40-year-old law allowing the Lord's Prayer to be said in schools, but as AFN's Bob Kellogg reports, none of the schools are doing that anyway.
The law allows the voluntary recitation of the Lord's Prayer in elementary schools, but as far as anyone knows, that's not being done. Matt Staver of the Liberty Council speculates on why Democratic legislator Amanda Bolden would even bother with a nearly forgotten law.
Obviously, you have someone who is searching out a particular area of the state legislature and the laws. I think what you have is a person who is on a search mission to literally root out history and to root out this law.
Saver says it's a bit mystifying that the committee voted against the bill in such a Democrat-controlled legislature.
This is an interesting scenario to watch and see what the rest of the New Hampshire legislature does. Obviously, the law is not causing any constitutional issues by simply being on the books.
I'm Bob Kellogg.
In final news this hour, Coca-Cola has released its first new flavor in more than a decade. Consumers can now purchase orange vanilla Coke. 3 other flavors were tested, those being raspberry, lemon, and ginger. Find more news at onenewsnow.com.
Miki Addison.
My challenge to you was to evangelize your children and to disciple your children and to give them the truth, because if you don't do that, then we have a culture that's waiting in the wings to disciple your kids and to make converts. And so I really believe and I expect the Lord to really set some people free today.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com. She's sharp, pointed, and insightful. This is Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I'm not pushing for speed, but we're not removing the sanctions. And we're going to have, I think, a very interesting 2.5 days in Vietnam.
This is an interesting poll that just came out. Listen to this. This new poll finds conservatives actually gaining on liberals. And by that, what we mean is the number of states where liberals outnumber conservatives has dropped.
Just moments ago, the House has passed this controversial abortion bill, 106 votes to 36. Now, House Democrats say this is all about preserving the same rights women in Vermont have had for the last 46 years.
And now, Stacy Washington.
All right, welcome back to the show. We are going to speak to Omar Qudrat, former political advisor to NATO, former counterterrorism prosecutor, about the coverage and analysis of the Trump-Kim North Korea summit that's coming up in Vietnam shortly. He'll be on with us in the next segment. Right now, we're going to get back to our callers. We have a few people who held over. If you want to join us, it's 866-963-2037, 866-963-2037. We also have that other cut from Jane Sanders, the wife of Bernie Sanders and fellow communist, Admirer Society president. Right now, let's go to Bill in Oklahoma. Hey, Bill, thanks for holding on.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I'm just wondering if I'm correct. I believe Bernie Sanders said something about that bread lines were good because that meant that all the rich people wasn't eating all the food. And if I'm correct in that, I just wonder why people should see that as a red flag. It should be like the explosion on the 4th of July. But I'm not sure, but I can't believe my ears, but I believe that he did say that the bread line was good, so that even makes him worse than just loving the architecture. He seemed to love the poverty, too, and I just wonder what your comment was on that.
So the comment that I have on it is, we did talk about it on the show. He's very, very obvious in these things. Like he doesn't hide the fact that he's this communist-loving socialist. And usually evil is like that. Often we think of evil as being something that sneaks up on us, and it can. And some people are really crafty at hiding who they really are. But Bernie Sanders is not one of those people. He usually defends. Like if you say, I can't believe you said that you like bread lines, he'll defend it. He doesn't deny it. He doesn't try to hide it. That to me is the biggest red flag there is. Someone who's openly advocating for things that would destroy your life, and instead of hiding it and trying to subvert it into your thought pattern, they openly try to sell you these horrible ideas. And he's been so effective at it. The crazier he is, the more the Democrats are like, look how he sells crazy. He's great at selling crazy. I'm going to sell crazy too, because they just want to win. They just want to win and sell whatever the flavor of the day is. It's like, which way is the wind blowing? I'll sell that. Even if it doesn't work, even if it makes them look stupid, like Kamala Harris, who's destroying her presidential opportunities by saying things and doing things, trying to out Bernie Sanders. She can't out Bernie him. He's been a communist for so long. It's in his blood. It's the way he talks. It's the way he thinks. It's who he is. She can't out Bernie him. I don't even know why she's trying. Let's go to Les in Ohio. Hey, thanks for calling the show today.
Hey, Sandy, or Stacy, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
I'm on a bike trail on a cell phone.
Okay.
I listen to you every day. I'm on the bike trail from 2 till about 4:30, and I tried to memorize your phone number, but it's taken me all these different times to get it down in memory so I could give you a call. I started listening to you when you took over after Brian. He had a 2-hour show, and I started listening to you, and the things that you say are so spot on. Us believers out here that there's more of us than what you could imagine. I'm a military family. Son-in-law retired as an E9 Navy, had a cousin that fought Golden Gloves in the Navy, and Vietnam didn't want me because I got cancer. I'm a 72-year-old guy now, but I try to jog in the morning and do the bike trail. But I really enjoy listening to what you say, and I saw Bernie when President Trump gave the State of the Union. When he said this country will never become socialistic, he was sitting there with his face red and just burning up. And I mean, I listened to you, and I wanted to know who the girl with the permanent tan. I think you said you were 6'2", and your girlfriends, you get together with your ARs, and you really speak the truth. And it's refreshing to listen to you when people try to lie on your program, that you cut them off and tell them you're not going to start this stuff on my show. And if they don't speak the truth, you come right back at them. And the people that don't like that country, I loved it when you said, if you don't like it here, why don't you leave?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Les, for listening, especially when you're on the bike trail, and also for calling the show today to say all those kind things. Thank you very much. And I want to point out, so, a lot of times people say, oh, it's this echo chamber. Oh, it's not. It's a bunch of real people. I'm a real person. My producer's a real person. Everybody who works at American Family Radio, American Family Association, Urban Family Talk, we're all real people. And we are absolutely doing what we want to do. We're doing it because we want to. And anybody who tries to kind of twist that and say that it's not, that people aren't listening because they want to, or people aren't doing these programs because they want to, it's just so far from the truth. You can hear from, I love the way everybody who is connected with American Family Radio is doing so, because it's the biblical worldview. So yeah, we talk about politics here on this show, but it's not that we're on one team or the other politically. It's that the biblical worldview mandates that on this issue, we're here. On this issue, we're here. And that's real. That's belief systems, as opposed to just rah political teams and I want to win and that type of stuff. So it's really great. Right now, I want to go to cut 2. It's Jane Sanders. She also has this romanticized, idealistic view of communism. It's stunning. It's number 2.
I'm Jane Sanders, Director of the Youth Office, and as Jim said, we're echoing each other. The city was beautiful. We were astounded with the openness, the optimism, the enthusiasm in the nation. We had, I think the things that struck me the most were the way that they dealt with children and with the cultural life of their community. As Howard mentioned, they put the money into public facilities, and they have palaces of culture, which are paid for strictly by trade union dues, and those places have movies and dances and a lot of artistic outlets for people. For instance, they might become members of an orchestra and study to play an instrument and perform. And when they go off on performances, it's seen not as something that they are doing on their own and they need to take vacation time from work, but it's seen as providing, contributing to the community life. So that becomes part of their work. The thing that struck me is, instead of compartmentalizing their lives into a job and hobbies, it's all interrelated, and it's all under the banner of community involvement.
Okay. So there's so much to kind of unpack there. I guess the thing that I would want to highlight is how she's trying to convince you with her, calm, sweet voice, that integration of your work life and your volunteering or things that you're doing socially is a good thing. Meaning, if you want to go do something social and it has any benefit to the community, you get to go do it during work hours and your employer has to pay for it. And the only way to force that to happen would be to have the government control all of the employment, because then the government, because we already see that with government employees. Government employees can go do something philanthropic and they still get to be on the clock. That's something that our government does now. But in the private sector, that doesn't usually fly unless you're going to do something philanthropic, and that will lead to new business, and you have to demonstrate that it actually has in the past, or it will, and it has to produce those results almost immediately. Otherwise, your boss is going to say, do that in your off time. If it helps you bring in more business, awesome. And I can tell you, I know for a fact that private sector employees actually do these networking events in their off time. They're not paid for it, and they count that as a part of what they do to increase their sales or increase their business prospects. But how it shows up in the form of payment is that when you, let's say you spend a lot of time networking in your field and you develop an extensive contact list, and through that you're able to garner large accounts and bring in new contracts, the way that pays you back is that you're recognized for bringing in the big contracts, and you get a promotion or you get a raise, or your boss puts you in charge of bigger accounts and more money comes from that. You do get compensated for time that you spend doing these things, but to say that, well, they're going to an orchestra and that's a part of their work. how is me going to an orchestra event and maybe emceeing it, what does that have to do with, my work here at the radio show? I mean, why would I expect anybody here to want to underwrite that? And why does she feel like that's so important? Why wouldn't she be talking about things that really actually have a lasting impact, like getting more kids to get that 50,000 word threshold before they reach kindergarten, that they would have spoken or read to them 50,000 words between birth and age 5. It's a precursor for having a fantastic vocabulary, reading at or above grade level, and progressing through school, according to the, so not being held back, not having learning disabilities. I mean, there's this amazing connection between what moms do with their kids from birth to age 5 that can yield such huge payback for kids, individual families, and individual kids on the long term, much more so than some employer being forced by the government to, pay their employees while they go perform in an orchestra. Do you see how worthless these ideas are? And that they're peddled so shamelessly without anyone asking, how can you show us where this benefits society in our country? That's the other thing that I find so annoying about all of these things, is that why would you go to Russia, or communist Russia why would you go there to try to find ideas on what could work here in the United States? Like, why is that your source of improvement? Why? So I want to pivot over. We're going to have more. In fact, what we're going to do? We're going to save that for tomorrow, I think. There's some sources for the $5.7 billion for the border wall, and Senator Lindsey Graham was unpacking that, and I thought it was really good. And we'll get to that. I promised you we would talk about this story, and I have two of these kind of really interesting stories. One of them is this: airliners have the cameras on the seat back screen. So I didn't know this, and I was really disturbed to read the story, so I'll share that with you. In other words, you're sitting on the airplane, and there's a little television screen in front of you, and you might be watching it or you might not, because maybe the free in-flight movie is not something you want to watch. Well, many of the makers of these screens have embedded cameras in them so that they can be turned on and they can see what you're doing. Now, you're on an airplane, so you're probably not doing much unless you're one of those people who's on that Facebook page, doing all kinds of crazy stuff on the aircraft and getting featured on Facebook. You're probably just sitting there reading or listening to something on your earbuds, or maybe you're working on your laptop, but that's not the point. You do have an expectation of privacy sitting on the airplane, that some foreign person that you don't know is not recording you and watching your every move, or maybe logging your face into some facial recognition software. So we'll talk about that. And then there's this Idaho teen who made $35,000 in 4 days plowing driveways. So I'm not exaggerating. He made $35,000 US plowing driveways. This is in Seattle, and his name's David Holston. He plans to donate 20% of his earnings to charity, which, like a tithe. He's 18 years old, and he was in Washington State visiting his mother in the hospital after surgery when his friend said, hey, you should put an advertisement out on Craigslist for landscaping services. During February, the city had received its heaviest snowfall in 70 years, with up to 10 inches in some places. So he received a flurry of interest from people online willing to give as much as $1,000. So he went home, lugged his equipment with him in his Dodge Ram from Coeur d'Alene in northern Idaho. So he hit the road with jobs lined up all night, and during that time he was answering his phone and adding new customers to his snow route for Monday. Some people paid, the average was between $500 and $750, which is above the average. The average is $110 per hour. So he killed it in 4 days, working 24 and 12-hour shifts. America, not communist Russia. We'll be back with more after this.
Here's Walker Wildman for Redeem Clean Laundry Products.
Not only do you get a great product and you get to obviously clean your clothes, get the stains out and use a multi-surface cleaner to clean your countertops and use the dryer sheets. You're doing all of this, and the money's going to support the work of American Family Association.
Redeem Clean Laundry Products were developed by AFA supporters Lynn Ingram and Jim Duncan to assist in funding the mission of the American Family Association. Redeem Clean products work as well as or better than other products on the market. They're environmentally safe, biodegradable, and they're made right here in the United States.
The great thing about Redeem Clean is not only is the product great, but it goes to support a great cause, and that is the work of American Family Association.
For clean laundry and a cleaner society, it's Redeem Clean. Visit redeemclean.afastore.net.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
Over the last few weeks, we learned why we must exercise discernment when viewing media coverage of hate crimes. Even though so many have turned out to be fake hate crimes, the pressure on media outlets to get your attention prevents them from exercising any discernment. That is why you need to exercise discernment. There were many good reasons why the media should have exercised some caution. Why would a black man in a fairly liberal city like Chicago be attacked in the middle of the night because of his race or sexual orientation? How would his attackers even know who he was, since he was probably bundled up because of sub-zero temperatures? You can look through the transcripts of broadcasts and read stories in newspapers and internet sites and never see even the slightest hesitation or disclaimer. Over the last few years of writing commentaries, I've documented lots of fake hate crime stories. Here are just a few. There was a story about a homophobic message printed on a cake from Whole Foods in Austin, Texas. It was actually written by a customer associated with the LGBT community. 3 black co-eds at the University of Albany said they were attacked on a city bus by white men using racial slurs. Hundreds came to a rally on campus to protest racism, but if you watch the surveillance videos, you can see that they actually attacked a white woman on the bus. And there are many examples of Muslim women falsely claiming that they were attacked and had their head coverings pulled off. Also, there's the student at Beloit College who reported anti-Muslim graffiti on his door. The police investigated and found he perpetrated the fraud himself. These are merely a small sample of people who have used fake hate crimes to call attention to themselves or their cause. This should be a reminder to be patient and wait for all the facts to come out. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Take Kirby and the Point of View team with you on the go with the Point of View app. Search for Point of View Radio at the Apple or Google Play stores.
Welcome back to Stacy on the Right on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
Hello. Welcome back to the program. It's my pleasure to welcome our next guest, Omar Qudrat, former political advisor to NATO ambassador, former counterterrorism prosecutor. Omar, thank you for joining the show today.
Thank you so much for having me on, Stacy.
It's good to talk to you. So we have this Trump, Kim, North Korea summit. It's happening. It's kind of highly anticipated. I think even with news of the so-called Mueller investigation winding down, a lot of people are really interested in seeing what's going to happen in Vietnam between these two world leaders, specifically about the denuclearization. What are your expectations here?
Well, this is the second face-to-face that President Trump and Kim Jong-un are having. I think that we have to ensure that we're tempering our expectations. We can't resolve this in 2 meetings. However, you have a head of to make verbal commitments. What we got to do now is move into a framework that has a practical and verifiable framework for disarmament. It would be a huge win for the United States and President Trump if we were to come out of this summit and be able to say that Kim Jong-un is going to, number one, tell us what he's got and where it is, and then number two, have a credible and verifiable framework for disarmament. Now, the question is, why would North Korea do this? Why would Kim Jong-un do this? What does he get out of it? Well, a key factor in understanding the context of this summit is where it's going to be, which is Vietnam. As we all know, it had a strong communist influence in the past and hostility toward the United States, and we were engaged in hostilities there. But Vietnam now is growing at about double the pace of the economy of even the United States by proportion. And so the idea is, look at what North Korea is, Mr. Kim Jong-un, and look at where it can be. Join the international community, end the isolationist approach where your foreign policy is essentially based on threatening a catastrophe of a nuclear warfare engagement with multiple nations, and come to the table. And to wrap this all up, huge win if we could get to moving into practical steps. We should have expectations that are somewhat realistic, however.
Well, I'm trying to keep my expectations realistic, but I've been really pleased with the fact that even without a verbal or even without a written agreement, no treaty or anything like that, there haven't been any rockets fired over the neighbors. So there was a really threatening posture that he was undertaking, and it was really rattling a lot of the people who live there. And we have, a lot of Americans living in that region of the world who would have been, in the line of fire, as it were. And so just the fact that we've moved past that to a place where they're now meeting and conversing with each other seems to be a victory of sorts.
That's a very important point. And the fact that the North Koreans have agreed, and specifically Kim Jong-un, because he's just a sole decision maker there, to stop the missile tests. And the United States, in exchange, agreed to stop its military exercises, that get close to the North Korean territory. We have about 23,500 American troops in South Korea, and that's not including family members. It is very important that we de-escalate and reduce the tension and the sense of hostility to open up the conditions for us to be able to move to more practical steps toward disarmament. You're absolutely right that was a big win without necessarily coming to any either legally binding or strong political commitments that we were able to accomplish that. Now, the big question is, what is the role of China going to be? The United States can do everything it can to try to bring about an outcome that achieves irreversible stability. But we have to remember that China is a key influencer here. And China has been pretty consistent about not only arming North Korea, but actually being the source of providing the equipment and material necessary for North Korea to develop its nuclear capability. So China can literally turn out the lights in North Korea. About 90% of North Korea's trade is composed with China, and China has tremendous influence. What China does not want is a unified Korean peninsula that is pro-America. And so China doesn't necessarily view a nuclear North Korea as a threat to itself. China does perceive the tensions escalating with the United States as a threat in itself and a concern that a Kim Jong-un that could become pro-America, that could end up having relations with the United States like Japan or Vietnam, is not in the interest of China. And so to the extent that we can leverage our political capital, we've got to get China on board and make China understand that China will lose a lot if it does not get on board with us trying to achieve a lasting peace.
Okay, so Omar, you touched on one that I'd planned to ask you about that. So, okay, can we just in the real world? And I understand that the president has been really successful in getting China to do some things that have been previously thought to be impossible with trade and things like that. So I understand he's a good negotiator, but the idea that North Korea would become, as the president has described, and I totally agree with him, it sounds so fantastic because they do have some beautiful natural wonders and things there, beaches and stuff, and so they could develop it and become a tourist destination and start to operate like a regular country instead of being that hermit hellhole that they currently have. But why would China want them to become more capitalistic when right now they kind of have them under their thumb and they can look down on them and they can say, look at these backward North Koreans, and they can kind of control Kim Jong-un with these little, they're like puppet masters over him. Why would what would be the impetus to make them do any of that? Because it only benefits us for him to come into the developed world and start building, luxury resorts there and start treating his people like people. It doesn't benefit the Chinese at all.
I think you're absolutely right. And so the challenge for us is really going to be trying to recalibrate China's perception and China's calculus as to their interests regarding this whole thing. So, I think what China needs to understand is if we go down the road of escalation and we end up in hostilities, which nobody wants, the United States is not interested in engaging in a catastrophic level of warfare with North Korea, with South Korea being the first to pay the price, and a region that'll get destabilized. Now, the result of us going down the route of escalation and potential military conflict is the United States will protect our interests, and we will ensure that we have a regime in North Korea that is no longer threatening to the United States. So what that means is China loses control and predictability of the outcome in the region and in North Korea specifically if North Korea tries tries to go down this road with us of escalation. The United States is not going to lose. We're going to ensure that our homeland is protected and our interests are protected. And so if China can understand that the alternative is the potential unpredictability of a North Korean regime that could become not just joining the international community for commerce purposes, but really pro-America because we're going to ensure that we're not going to have a regime that is nuclear capable and threatening us, then China needs to understand it's going to have to accept this outcome. It can pull its levers internationally, politically, militarily, economically, in other ways, and it's just a losing bet for China to try to take North Korea and the United States down this road for much longer. You know, China plays this waiting game, and the United States is done playing it. We're after a result right now, and China's got to understand that time is up. And the last point on this is, as you pointed out, President Trump has changed the rules of the game. President Trump is not making China feel that they could play games with us forever in a number of ways. And President Trump has done that with a number of countries and political matters. So China's going to wake up. President Trump gives rude awakenings to lots of parties around the world. And so to the extent that China can understand that we're serious, that there is a binary approach here, you're either getting on board with what we're doing or you're losing the ability to influence the outcome because we're going to protect our interests, then maybe China will kind of wake up and smell the coffee on this.
So I like to call it the emerging Trump doctrine for foreign policy because he has really reset the table in a number of areas with a number of countries, and everyone was wailing and complaining, and now things are actually starting to work out. 2 years in, we're actually seeing some positive results from that. Is there anything else you can think of that sticks out right away as something that we could kind of put in that category as the Trump doctrine in the foreign policy arena?
Sure. I mean, look at the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. I was a political advisor to NATO. President Trump has been criticized so widely about the way he's speaking to NATO countries. And, you know, while we all don't have to necessarily like the fact that President Trump might be perceived to be putting down our allies who we're standing shoulder to shoulder with in active combat zones like Afghanistan and so forth, the result of it was, and the NATO Secretary General has said this publicly, that President Trump has influence bringing about a stronger NATO. You have nations that have produced more, committed more to their common defense and to their own defenses, and meeting their obligations. NATO countries are supposed to contribute a minimum by agreement of 2% of their GDP toward their own defense, not our defense, but toward their own defense. Mm-hmm. And the United States has not been treated fairly in that regard for a very long time. Now, were there some negative words said? Yes, you know, feelings are hurt, but what was the result? You have a stronger NATO. You have a NATO that can stand up to Russia, that is amassing equipment and a presence in Eastern Europe. You have a European command that is putting a stronger presence in Eastern European countries and a stronger NATO. So I think that should be really highlighted. That should not be forgotten. NATO is at the center of gravity with a lot of our geopolitical interests, and this is a direct result of what you're referring to as the new Trump doctrine.
Wow. Okay, that was, guys, that's worthy for the podcast, which obviously every show goes into the podcast. But I would say, you know, clip this at that point on YouTube and share it. Because I think you've kind of broken it down for us in ways that we can not only absorb and understand, but that we can share with others when people, because one of the things I like to do, Omar, is have quantifiable reasons why I support the president, as opposed to just because, you know, he's not a Democrat. It's things that he's doing that I feel like, okay, that justifies my vote for him. And this is a constant thing. It's like a constant ongoing job interview where the president, you know, he's got to kind of win again. What he did last month isn't enough. He's got to do new things. And I think this summit with the leader of North Korea it's just another win for him, because they're sitting down and they're talking instead of fighting on Twitter, which I felt at the time I was kind of flabbergasted, but it really worked. He actually got down in the sand with them and kicked some sand, and they pushed each other a little bit. And then they decided, I think we're going to, I think we're going to actually talk now, like talk real, actual, quantifiable business. And they've done that, and they're going to do it again. So excellent to have you on the show. Your analysis is spot on, and I really appreciate the perspective of someone who you worked with members of NATO and you were there. And I wanted to say thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
All right. Hope to talk to you again soon. That was Omar Qudrat. He's a former political advisor to a NATO ambassador and former counterterrorism prosecutor. So really great background there. And I love it when we have guests like this on the show. The expertise and knowledge base there is just outstanding. And it's really, I just think, again, I am not some blind supporter of the president, but I think it's a mistake not to give credit where credit is due, because you're going to give the smacks and the criticism when you don't like something. So definitely, if you see something going on that you think is good, go for it. Compliment it, share it, talk to other people about it. It's validation, yes, for the vote that I cast, certainly, but it's also a big deal for us as a country. When he talks about the number of people we have there, Omar was just mentioning, just part of the expats, Americans who live in that region of the world. These are people who expect the same level of safety and security that we expect here in the homeland. They know it's a little different because they're in a foreign country, but they're in a country that we are closely allied with, and they expect for us to maintain peace and prosperity there as well. And we want to see our allies have a level of security that, they're not constantly worried about, similar to the situation in Israel where they're surrounded by enemies and they're constantly receiving rocket fire, and it's a different way of living. And so it's good to see the president make this move. I'm just holding back, how it is when something, possibly something great could come out of it, possibly nothing could come out of it. I doubt if they're going to leave the meeting with a negative aspect. I think they've gotten past that initial part, but it's going to be interesting to see what they come up with in the way of developing this relationship. And I think the people who were saying, a year ago, oh, he's elevating this, tin-pot dictator. He's making this guy, valid and elevating him. Okay, sure, if having a conversation elevates someone. But in the intervening months, have we seen like a huge popularity junket for Kim Jong-un? Not really. People still see him in the same way that they have in the past. But what they have seen is that for someone who seemed so intractable before, someone who he couldn't negotiate, he seemed like he couldn't get anything done, he's found some kind of common ground with President Trump where whatever the mutual respect is, whatever the exchange has been in the past, they have now a desire to continue to develop the relationship. And I would like for people who are thinking about, if you're already thinking about 2020, think about what a change in leadership in the United States could bring about in the relationship with North Korea. If we were to send someone in there who just wanted to kowtow and bow and wanted to kind of reorient ourselves with the hands-off, arm's-length positioning that we had before under previous presidents, which brought us the tests, the rocket firing, the missile tests, the development of nuclear, capabilities. That was all going on under all of the previous presidents, whether they were Democrats or Republicans. Now you have Donald Trump, and all of that is kind of screeched to a halt, and they're talking about something else, which is developing North Korea into an actual country, a place where people could work and earn a living, and a place where foreigners could travel there and take advantage of the beauty of their beaches, etc. I mean, again, what's to find wrong with that, right? It sounds like something we could get behind as a country. Why would we want to change that? All right. When we get back, we're going to talk about the Venezuelan citizens and the socialist policies and more. Stay there.
Have you noticed how your priorities change as you grow older? They are simple and silly as children. Most of us don't even want to admit what they were in college. As a young adult, they start becoming more serious, and then your priorities completely change when you have a family. As we reach the last quarter of life, we start thinking more about our mortality and what waits for us. The problem with that is none of us are guaranteed any amount of time. Don't wait until you think you need to get serious about God. He sent His Son, Jesus Christ, to offer you forgiveness and hope for eternity. Don't ignore that gift and wait any longer to invite Jesus Christ into your life. Call 888-NEED-HIM to learn how to have a personal relationship with Jesus and take care of the biggest priority in life. That number is 888-NEED-HIM. 888-NEED-HIM.
Laura Perry.
She refused to use the male pronouns or call me Jake. So what that did for me is that she didn't know at the time. That was like a tether to reality. God never let me forget who I was. And that was a radical thought to me, and I did not want to hear it at first. When I first heard it, it really kind of made me angry.
The Marriage, Family, and Life Conference is coming June 20th through the 22nd. Learn more and register at urbanfamilytalk.com.
There are many ways you can listen to the shows of Urban Family Talk. One of those ways is through our very own app. Whether you have an iPhone or an Android, just go to the App Store and search for Urban Family Talk. You'll have immediate access to 24-hour programming as well as the podcast for each show. You'll be able to tune in no matter where you are. Speaking of tuning in, we have our own channel on another radio app called TuneIn. Cool, right? Urban Family Talk is everywhere. Just download the app and take us wherever you go.
This is Poll Parade with Fox News Director of Polling, Dana Blanton.
A second summit for the United States and North Korea this week. In our Fox News poll, an overwhelming majority says the country poses at least a minor threat to U.S. national security. That includes just over half who say major threat. That puts North Korea above the migrant caravan and instability in Venezuela on a list of threats. By a 12-point margin, Democrats are more likely than Republicans to call North Korea a threat. Yet Democrats are far less likely than Republicans, by nearly 30 points, to back military action to stop the country's nuclear program. President Trump declared during the State of the Union,
If I had not been elected President of the United States, we would right now, in my opinion, be in a major war with North Korea.
Compared to 2 years ago, 3 in 10 voters think conflict with North Korea is less likely now. 2 in 10 say more likely. Largest share, 4 in 10 voters, think the likelihood of conflict with North Korea is about the same now as when Trump took office. I'm Dana Blanton, and that's your Poll Parade.
You can download episodes of Stacy on the Right from the podcast page on AFR.net or UrbanFamilyTalk.com. Now, back to the show on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk.
I have some memories when I was 11 years old, as well as a little earlier. You could see shortages of food, especially milk, toilet paper. By the time I left Venezuela, we didn't have electricity at least once a week. Water sometimes went out for weeks long. And I was privileged, let me tell you, because I know people who lived in the rural areas instead of the city, Caracas, where I lived, and they sometimes didn't have electricity for weeks. Now people are starving because they don't have even basic food. Look, there is no further proof of my argument than Bernie Sanders' statements a few days ago when he refused to say that Nicolas Maduro was a dictator, and he refused to recognize Juan Guaido as the president of Venezuela, something that even Speaker Nancy Pelosi and other Democrats have done. This is really dangerous, and Democratic primary voters really need to push out these radical Democrats from their party, because not all Democrats are that way. And I really urge bipartisan compromise on this issue, because if we continue Venezuela with socialism, and if we push very radical socialist policies in the United States might get closer to what we're seeing right now in Venezuela.
So let me just first of all say, right after he said that, the host on CNN said, I just want to make a correction that, Bernie Sanders and the Democrats' New Deal is not socialism. And those ideas have nothing to do with what you're seeing in Venezuela, which is an utter fabrication, total lie. And and programming note, the spammer who's spamming me with the name Moses, I've just now blocked your spams yet again. So I'm not reading those. I have no idea what you've emailed me. I don't have to open them to actually block you. So I've blocked you again, just to let you know I'm not getting whatever hate-filled garbage you're sending to me. As soon as I see your email, I just send it over to the spam. So I'm not getting those. I know you're listening to the show, though, and good for you for paying attention. And I hope you actually learn something and come around to not being a spammer. So I think that's important when we're talking about listening to people who actually have some knowledge base on an issue. this Venezuelan immigrant criticizing Democratic hopefuls for trying to bring socialism to America, he's not kidding around, and he's not making stuff up. He's saying the truth, that socialism has failed Venezuelans, so much so that they now have aid and food and diapers and supplies on the edge of the country, right there at the border, and Maduro won't let it in. So rich people are doing okay, but the poor are literally starving, and they're eating trash, and they're, you know, having to slaughter their pets and eat them, and they've raided the zoos for animals, and they're desperate. And the aid that's there, I mean, you would think a dictator would say, you know what, I don't care what, you know, I don't care if people send aid here, send all the aid you want, I don't have to pay for it. Well, the reason why they don't want aid to get in is because then they'd have to admit that they need aid. They'd have to admit that what they're doing isn't working and that people are starving. And so instead of doing that, they're just let the aid sit there. Oh my goodness, someone in one of the chats, Smoke, says he burned all the supplies up. What kind of demonic garbage is this? So, and Americans, just to make sure you understand what kind of people we have living within the border and why we don't need any more crazy because we're all full up, of Americans on Twitter saying that the real problem is Marco Rubio, because Marco Rubio texted a picture of Saddam Hussein and said, this could be you, Maduro, because, you know, we deposed Saddam Hussein. Oh, man, that is just terrible, terrible news. And instead of being angry at Maduro, they're angry at Marco Rubio. Like, really, bros? You're angry at Marco Rubio for sending a tweet? You're not angry at this dictator for burning up good supplies? First of all, so anybody who's ever seen what they do for humanitarian aid, you know, it takes hundreds of people and so much coordination for logistics, because they literally go to a place that maybe has warehouse space, and they'll say, look, we're going to gather some aid together for people in Venezuela. And we know that you don't have anybody leasing this warehouse right now. So can we use this warehouse space to stage this relief effort? And we'll maybe be here for a month or 90 days or whatever. And then the owner of that space either agrees or doesn't agree. And sometimes it's a person who is, you know, owns warehouse space will say, I have warehouse space you can use. Come on, you can stage it here. And that's the address they use to bring the shipments of aid in. So they have somewhere to actually sort through it and decide how to package it, whether they're packaging it into a box as a care package, or they're keeping all the diapers together because they're going to deliver it. And then the people who are actually passing the aid out will say, everyone who needs diapers get in this line, everyone who needs, you know, so there are different ways to put it together. And people who do these aid type, you know, the gathering and then the dissemination, they know what they're doing. So we're talking about just thousands of man hours of people who have to receive the donations, or open them, organize them, catalog them, then package them back up for shipping. Either they're flying them in, or they're taking big rigs and driving them all the way down. Whatever the case is, if he burned it up, he literally burned up thousands of man hours, tens of thousands of dollars worth of you know, free things. It's just crazy that he would do that. Like, why would he do that? But then again, you know, this is not a normal guy. He's a dictator. Like, first of all, he's still fat. Everybody else is starving. The average weight loss of a Venezuelan is like 30 pounds. And he's still got a pot stomach. So he doesn't still have a pot stomach because his stomach just isn't going down because he can't lose weight. He's looking like that because he's eating still. He still has a very nice lifestyle while his subjects, they're not his countrymen anymore, they're his subjects. He's treating them like he owns them. They're starving to death. It's just terrible. So I wanted to finish up. We were talking about this story right before we had our guest about this kid. He's a young guy. I shouldn't call him a kid. He's 18. He says he mows lawns during the summer, and yearly, by mowing lawns in the summer, he earns $30,000 a year. So this kid who's 18 already has a job that pays $30,000 a year for summer work. That means he's making roughly 10 grand a month in the summer. That's good consultant money right there. You know, you work on a campaign, you'll probably pull down $5,000 to $10,000 a month. He's doing that mowing lawns. So he normally, and this is just the going rate where he was, because he lives in Coeur d'Alene, but his mom was down in Seattle, and he went down there to see her. He normally, the snow mowing, blowing, whatever, costs about $110 an hour. But if there's a lot of snow and there aren't very many people to do the work, some plowers will charge $400 an hour. They're like, you want your driveway plowed? $400 an hour. If you want me to show up, $400. Well, he said he was accepting jobs for $500 and $750 an hour in some places. They're like, if you show up, we'll pay you $750. And so he did it. He showed up and he got paid. He said he was working 12-hour days from last Saturday to Wednesday, took Sunday off. He worked a whopping 24 hours straight from Monday to Tuesday, resulting in an astonishing amount of money to take home. He says, he quotes Proverbs 9 when explaining that the Lord doesn't want you to be a sluggard. He says he could have taken even more. He said he had to turn down offers because he just didn't have the manpower to take every offer that he was given. I would have employed 5 plow trucks. If I had a whole crew, I would have sent them all over to Seattle. He says, my parents taught me to work. You need to get out there and plow your field and make your living. That's exactly what he plans to do as a part of his 10-year plan of expanding his business before selling it. The Grateful team, who aims to make $100,000 this year, is planning on giving 20% of his recent earnings to his church. After the $7,000 donation, he'll buy lawn equipment and use the remainder as part of a fund that he's saving towards buying his first house. His first house for cash, by the way. Speaking about how Luke 12:31 Bible verse, but seek his kingdom and all these things will be given to you as well. He says that proved inspiring during his hard work, and that he knew he was given these opportunities to make these large sums for a reason. He says, the Lord blessed me with the money for the sole purpose of advancing his kingdom. All the glory goes to God. And if you're wondering where this story was, it's not Charisma News, and all these other news outlets will probably pick it up. And I'm not downing them for not picking it up. I'm saying where the story was located, where I found it was on the UK Daily Mail. That's not a right-leaning website. It's a lefty site. And most of their articles are about celebrities wearing bathing suits or whatever, but they have a news section that does politics. And this story caught my eye because I saw the number 35,000 in 4 days, and I thought, what could he possibly be doing? It's proof that you can do anything. If you're willing to work, you know, I know some people, if you said, you'd have to work 24 hours straight, but, you know, over 4 days you can make 35,000, they'd say, I can't work 24 hours straight. You know, I don't know if I can. He was like, he just kept working. He kept getting phone calls and he kept working. And now he's caught the eye of business owners, Wendy's and other places like that. And if you think they're not going to call him the next time there's a major snowfall and say, we're expecting 10 inches of snow, you certainly are going to come down here with your crews, right? And he is going to drive down again and make money. The other thing is, if anybody who's living in Seattle who has half a brain, they should be thinking, he could have had 5 crews. Let me look and see, okay, how much money do I have saved? How much does it cost to rent a truck? Maybe I just rent the truck on my first weekend, but maybe I can make $15,000 on a weekend. Or how about if I get some of my buddies together and we buy a snow plow to put on the front of the truck we already own, just because you got to start somewhere. If you're not planning on doing something, having to do with snow removal, and you live in Seattle and you're not working, you're not reading, you're not understanding what's just happening here. That kid saw a huge gaping hole of opportunity and he jumped in it and filled it. And as reward for that, he made $35,000. And he's going to make $100,000 this year because what is it, February? It might snow there a couple more times before the season is over. And so he's going to make money again. And then over the summer, he will convert that snow plowing. That's behind him. That's the winter. He'll be doing lawn mowing and edging and whatever other kind of landscaping jobs people ask him to do. And he's going to hit that target. So that's why I don't understand why we're sitting up and we're believing a lie. It's only a lie unless you believe it. The lie is America is stacked up against minorities. America is stacked up against people who can't get past their skin tone, their permanent tan, they're, too tall, too short, too fat, too skinny, don't have the right educational background. And while a person is sitting up thinking that about themselves and downgrading themselves, other people are sitting around thinking, I could have sworn I just heard this, my neighbor say at the grocery store she can't find anybody to mow her grass, and that it's her and her neighbor on the other side of her, the neighbor on the other, so both of her neighbors on the sides of her, and the lady across the street, and the lady whose yard backs up to hers. None of them have anybody to mow their grass, and they're all older, so they just don't have anybody. Their kids don't live in town. They're single. They live alone. They need someone to mow their grass. And you're standing there listening to that conversation and thinking, and I got nothing to do this summer. Yes, you do. You have to, in between now and the summer, find enough money to buy yourself either a push lawnmower or a riding lawnmower, used on Craigslist, by the way. You need to watch some YouTube videos about how to keep it running, what you need to do, change the oil, rinse it off when you're done, whatever. And then you need to get the address of that lady. Hey, we're neighbors. I live 2 subdivisions over from you. Did you say you needed somebody to mow? Can I come over and take a look at your yard? I'd be willing to mow it for you. Go over there, ask her what she's willing to pay, and tell everybody around, she's paying me this much to mow it. So all y'all got to pay me the same amount, and you have to pay me the day that I do it. When I'm done, I want money in my hand, and I'll do it every week. That's how you take advantage of all the opportunities that are laying around. I can't tell you how many times people I know are emailing around. They'll say, do you know anybody who tiles? Do you know anybody who does, this kind of construction work, that kind? Because people can't find anybody to do the work. So if you know how to do it, or you're willing to take a few extension courses at the community college to learn how to do it, why are you not doing that so you can get that work? It's not all about doing some fancy job with a suit. It's about right now you need to make some money. Right now there are opportunities all over the place to make money. So instead of saying, oh, I'm a victim, I just can't do it, do it. You're not a victim unless you're a victim of yourself. We're all victims of our own decisions that we've made. We're all victims of the idea that I chose this instead of choosing that, and now I'm here, and you got to walk that out until you can get out of it. But if you have an opportunity to make money, instead of thinking about white people someplace who might be stopping people from doing, forget about that. Just don't waste your mental energy on that. It's such a great story. We're going to be talking about tonight at the dinner table. My family is like, what is she doing? I'm bringing more news and information to the dinner table. All right. That's the show for today. God bless you. I hope you are warm and safe and whole and ready for the show tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, right here on American Family Radio and Urban Family Talk. Thanks for making your home at AFR.